Hello and welcome to the second edition of Ryanology, a talk show from Dartmouth High School made by students for students in our community. On this episode, we are featuring an interview with our principal, Mr. Thibault, as well as a recent marine science field trip to Upon-Against Park. Stay tuned and enjoy. Welcome back. Today I'm very excited once again to host our principal of Dartmouth High School, Mr. Thibault. How are you doing today, Mr. Thibault?
I'm doing well, Ryan. Thank you, and thank you for having me on Ryanology. I'm excited to be here and excited to talk with you today.
Absolutely. So how would you say that the back-to-school year transition is going so far for not only you, but for the students?
Well, I think the back-to-school transition is going well so far. We had our second advisory of the school year yesterday, and that was the opening of the advisory session, right? It was to reflect on the school year, and at least, for the 14 students I have in my advisory, they all reported that the year was off to a good start. The biggest challenge I would say is the traffic in front of the school in the morning, which I understand, and it can be frustrating, but we just need to adjust what time we arrive at Dartmouth High School, right? So if you get here between 7 and 7:10, that's the window where there's not a lot of traffic. From 7:10 until 7:30, unfortunately, there is a lot of traffic between the buses and parent drop-offs and student drivers. So I know we have an early start to our morning already, but I do think students and parents, if they just plan to arrive between that 7 to 7:10 window, you'll avoid most of the traffic that you've experienced so far.
And it's actually kind of funny that you mentioned that because that's actually a question I was going to ask about the traffic. We did have some viewers of Ryanology tune in, and they were kind of asking some questions, and they were wondering, would there be any way to open up the school earlier?
So that's a good question. That was actually something we discussed in my advisory yesterday. It's not a matter of just opening up the school earlier because we need adults to supervise kids, right? If we take you into the building, it's our responsibility to supervise you. So contractually, our teachers have to be here by 7:15. That's why we open the doors right at 7:15. And our teachers have been great about getting here and being ready to receive kids right at 7:15, so we appreciate their efforts. What we don't want to have happen is what has happened pre-COVID, which is we'd open up the doors at 6:45 in the morning, but then that meant a lot of congregation in the main foyer, a lot of clusters of kids. And so with close contacts and our responsibility to contact trace, we just can't do it. I would love to open it up earlier, but again, the reason why we have to hold that 7:15 is because we're responsible for our contact tracing, and if we aren't supervising you, then we can't possibly do that.
Absolutely. How would you say that students in the student body are transitioning into the school year? Last year we had the difficulties of COVID and the pandemic. We had a lot of schedule changes, but how would you say things are going so far this year?
So far, so good, I would say. I think that, if you talk to your peers and your classmates, I think that they would, many of them would share that they're excited to be able to be back and to interact with their friends again. It's amazing that sometimes we don't appreciate things until it's taken away from us. And so I think March of 2020, when school was shut down, and then even last year to some degree when we were in the cohorts, I think that it makes people realize school is a positive experience for the most part. Sure, there are some challenges. That's part of being a teenager. But, I think many of our students appreciate the opportunity to be back in school 5 days a week and interact with their peers.
Absolutely. It really helps with the social aspect of students. Students, I talked with Mr. Shea about it last week, developing anxiety and things like depression, and being back in a social place, it can help that.
Yeah, sure can. We also want to be mindful too, though, that it can also be a challenge, right? Because
Absolutely.
for 18 months, we've had students who haven't been in school 5 days a week. And so just the transition back to school is daunting for some students. And one of the nice things is we do have our school counselors and our school social workers to support students. I think our teachers are also very supportive and understanding of that as well. So I think I would want to say to any students who are out there, if you are experiencing anxiety, if you are struggling with, managing emotions productively, anything like that, there are people here to help, whether it's your advisor, whether it's your a school social worker, school counselor, an administrator, a trusted teacher. Reach out to an adult. We're here to support you, but we can't support you if we don't know there's an issue, right? So communication is so important.
And just to touch back last year, we had a lot of new policies come to Dartmouth High School, whether it be the retake policy or just some other things that opened up. So some of those have changed. Would you like to speak on that?
Well, the grading policy is probably what has changed a little bit. Last year we had a school-wide grading policy, and so this year there's no school-wide grading policy. However, we have asked teachers to continue with the retake policy, and we are, collaborating with our teachers to ensure that continues. But again, I think what's really important for students to understand is that policy is meant as a safety net. It's not meant to be, well, I know I can have a retake so I don't have to prepare for my first attempt. And I want to be clear, I believe 95% of our students prepare for that first test, regardless of that retake policy. But some of the feedback that we've gotten is that some students have been a little bit lax in their preparation or have used that safety net as a way around that first attempt, and that's not the intent, and it's up to all of us to make sure that we do our very best each and every day, that we're prepared for any assessment the first time we take it, and then if we need to fall back on the retake, it's a safety net for us, but it's not meant to be an end around that first attempt. And I want to be clear with students about that. You should be preparing for the first attempt to the best of your ability.
And it's really important because the things that we do here in high school, i.e. focusing on first attempts, doing these other things, it's going to affect us later on in life, in college. There's not going to always be that chance to just retake a test, and what your grade is, it's going to be final.
Right. And again, I hear that, Ryan, too, that, and it is part of our responsibility is absolutely preparing students for the real world. What I can tell you is that in the real world, there are oftentimes safety nets and, second opportunities to do things, whether that be, for example, taking the bar exam if you're looking to become a lawyer, or taking the teacher exam and looking to become a teacher. You can take those tests more than once. However, you don't want to if you don't have to. They cost more money. It's another, a day to take the exam. You have to oftentimes reschedule it, so it takes months. So we really don't want students to get the idea that life's about waiting for a second attempt. That's not what it's about. You should prepare for the first attempt. But if you don't do well, you should persist. You should go back and keep trying. And so I do think the retake policy in that regard, because the easiest thing to do is, I failed, and just move on and be done with it. That's easy. Anyone can do that. We don't want students to accept failure. We want you to persist. We want you to keep taking another shot at it. But we also want you to learn as well, right? That's the other part. The other idea behind the retake policy is that you do your very best. Maybe you didn't learn something or master it quite the way you needed to. And so the retake's a second chance to do that, which shows persistence. The other thing to keep in mind is not all students take advantage of that retake policy either, which is too bad, because not every school has a retake policy. Not every school allows students to take a second shot at an assessment. So I would really encourage all Dartmouth High School students to put your best foot forward. If it doesn't work out, take advantage of the safety net, but only take advantage of that safety net if you absolutely need it.
And now to move a little bit away from the whole grading policy aspect, for you personally, what would you say is your most important goal for this school year?
I would say the most important goal is that we continue to move back towards some sense of normalcy with our school year, understanding that it's not going to be completely, February of 2020. There's still going to be some disruption. Unfortunately, this pandemic is still very much here. We're still going to have students who need to quarantine. We're going to still need have students who miss some time from school. But my goal is to not see, us go back to hybrid or shutdowns or anything like that. We want to keep learning moving forward. We want to make sure that students are on grade level. And so I would say the number one goal is just a continued march toward some return to normalcy, so that we can continue to operate.
And actually, to touch back to COVID, and this is the final question. Now that we know more of the effects and more of how it spreads and just more about it in general, what is Dartmouth High School doing to help its students and staff protect against COVID-19?
Sure, that's a very good question. So the first thing I would say is that students need to protect themselves, right? Well, not just students, adults as well. We all have to protect ourselves, right? So wear your mask, wear it appropriately, above the nose, snugly. I can't tell you how many times in the hallway we're asking students, please put it up over your nose. And I know the masks are a nuisance. I know that they're inconvenient, but they're one of the best mitigation strategies, aside from vaccination, that we have against this pandemic. I don't want to get into politics, and I know that, unfortunately, mask wearing has been made a political issue. Vaccines have been made a political issue. I would encourage everyone who's eligible, to get vaccinated. I think that the science and that the best information we have is that when you are fully vaccinated, you have a high level of protection against getting COVID, but you also, if you do get it, are likely to have mild or be asymptomatic. So even with the vaccinations, even if you end up getting it, there's still a very high level of protection against serious illness or hospitalization, and that's what we want. The other thing is it doesn't spread as easily in vaccinated populations, right? So the more students we have who are more students and staff we have who are vaccinated, the better we are. Besides that, using common sense and the basics that protected us last year are still effective. Wash your hands frequently. We have the hand sanitizer up. Keep as much distance as you can from one another whenever possible, especially indoors. Those are all important and common sense things that we can do to protect ourselves and protect one another. The other thing is, if you don't feel well in the morning, err on the side of caution, stay home. That's important. And the final thing I would just touch on that we're doing to keep students engaged and being able to learn is we have the Test and Stay program in place. We actually just started it this week, and we're thankful to the district for supporting that. But basically what Test and Stay is if you're a close contact and you're asymptomatic, but you've been labeled a close contact, you can come in the morning and take a rapid test, 15 minutes, you get your result. As long as it's negative, you can stay in school that day. Obviously, if it's positive, you have to go home. We need parent consent to do that. So in the newsletter that goes out every week, there's a link there. It's just a quick website you go to, and parents can consent to have their students participate in that Test and Stay program. That's also an important measure we have to keep students engaged, keep them learning, and keep us safe, right? Because you get that test result instantly, and that allows us to make sure positive cases are not in the school population.
Yeah, I would just also like to add that the Test and Stay program, vaccines, mask wearing, it's all very important. So we encourage all students to continue doing those things, continue to be safe, and we will be able to get out of this faster. Thank you, Mr. Thibault, for joining me today on Ryanology, and we hope to see you again.
Thank you, Ryan. Yes, and I look forward to coming back at some point this school year. Have a great year.
Let's take a look at the marine science field trip as they went to Upon-Agansett Beach. We'll see what they caught, what they dug up, and what they found out.
Here we are, Mrs. Franco and Mr. Tweedy with our marine science classes at the Upon-Agansett boat ramp here in Dartmouth.
So the goal for today was to have our students use different marine tools, namely the seine net, to collect animals for our aquarium project that they're going to be working on for the next 6 weeks.
I like this class because I like to meet new people, and like I said, I really enjoy animals. They're just amazing.
I liked it because it was like a one-time opportunity thing, and I don't really know when I'm gonna ever go scoop up fish like this. It's really interesting too.
I liked my experience. I think this was the second time I came here. I think I came here for marine biology as well.
I got to go in the water with my friends, and we got to like bring the fishing line through, so that was a ton of fun. It was really fun to like be one-on-one with the animals and like just get to be so up close with them, so it was just so much fun.
So this is just one of the many projects that we do. This one here focuses on understanding the importance of the nitrogen cycle in the natural environment by observing it in our marine aquariums.
It's something fun. It's something you don't normally do in a science class. You go outside and you actually see things hands-on.
I like it. We just caught oysters, just found shells, and then I molded this crab.
I really love the ocean. I'm also really terrified of it, so that's why I took this class. But I think my favorite part so far is definitely this field trip.
I would definitely encourage other people to take this because you're probably never gonna have another class like this.
So as they're learning about it, they can experience it.
It's science in action.
But the whole thing is super enjoyable. It was a beautiful day to be out here.
Hi, thank you for visiting me in the ocean. I had a fun time. I'll try not to eat you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you for watching this episode from Ryanology. I'd like to thank Principal Ross Thibault for being on the show today, as well as you for watching.